And of course, I even think about the Proverbs where wisdom and folly are both crying the same thing in the street. Come follow me.
Right.
I'm going in the right direction.
Yeah.
And if we can see where this is really going to take us, it wouldn't be as attractive, but we just don't see it until it's already destroyed our life a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And thankfully that even if we have had a lot of destruction in our life, that God is able to restore when we are saved, and he starts to work and restore things, which is amazing that he does that. But I think, that is the power, that song where it says, God, he breaks the power of canceled sin.
Yes.
When you bring that sin to the cross and Christ pays for it, the power is broken.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always mean it's easy, but it is possible and it is proven.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the It Stands Written podcast. My name is Braden. I'm with Elijah and a special guest today. But before we introduce this special guest, Elijah, we're starting / continuing in a special series today. You want to let the listeners know what we got going on?
Yeah, thanks, Braden. I spoke with Justin about this. I wanted to start to formalize a bonus series where we get to bring guest speakers on and hear their testimonies. And really, the thing is that testimonies are edifying. Testimonies are relatable, and they show the power of Christ. I think that even into eternity, for the rest of eternity, every Christian that we get to talk to in heaven will tell us of the amazing story of how Christ saved them.
Yeah.
And so one of the key verses behind this is in 1 Peter 3:15. Peter's talking about people who are accusing or trying to attack the Christian. And 1 Peter 3:15 says, "But sanctify Christ as Lord in your hearts." And this is it right here. "Always being ready to make a defense to everyone who asks you to give an account for the hope that is in you, yet with gentleness and reverence." And so one of the things that I have seen here and there is people who don't want to share their stories, and that's okay. Sometimes it hurts. Sometimes it's not the appropriate time or place.
Yeah.
But when it is the appropriate time or place, and I think this podcast is an amazing opportunity for that, that is a command that we're given to be able to give a defense for what Christ has done for us.
Yeah.
And so the goal of this series is to edify and relate to and just show Christ's glory. So Braden, go for it.
Yeah, and we have done a couple episodes similar to this in the past. We've had Rick and Jennifer and then Juan and Gloria, and they came on and shared their testimony and the faithfulness of God in their life. And so the goal too is just to encourage listeners and just to show God's faithfulness in all of our lives. But special guest with us today is someone from our church, Pam. Thank you for being with us today.
Okay. I particularly love testimonies because it shows us while we proclaim Christ is exclusive, there is no other way to the Father. When we hear testimonies, we realize how inclusive it is that you come from wherever you are, whatever background, whatever religion, age, gender, whatever your problems are. You come from where you are, but we all get to the same place one way or another.
Yeah.
Amen.
And so there's this unbelievable opportunity of inclusivity.
Yeah. And testimonies are powerful because, you can argue with the atheists about creation and this and that and logic and whatnot. But when you share the experience of God's faithfulness and what he's done in your life, not that experience has the highest authority, but like no one can discount your story. If it's what's happened, what God's done in your life, it brings power.
Yeah.
That's so awesome. But if you want to just, Pam, give the listeners some context. What was your life like before coming to Christ? So did you have religious background? What was that all about?
Yeah, tell us the story from the start.
Okay, so I was raised in I would say, practically atheistic, but intellectually agnostic, academic home. My parents were both doctors, no religion at all, never had gone to church, had no impression of Jesus because nobody ever talked about him.
Yeah.
Then went to college. Then when I got saved, I was 40 years old. I had never heard sin. No one had ever talked to me about the gospel, which when I got saved, I was kind of mad about that, in fact, that no one had ever cared enough to even mention it to me.
Yeah.
But setting that aside, at that time, I was living in an environment of kind of a universal Hindu, Buddhist, even though though I didn't really believe any of it, that was the context where I got saved. So I was 40 years old with no concept of sin. If you had asked me about God, I would have said, if he exists, I must be among his favorites because I have a great life.
Wow.
I had no problems. I had healthy, wonderful kids, a good marriage, no financial problems, no health problems. So I would not have thought that God was my enemy.
Yeah.
I would have been okay if you told me that I was God's enemy. But when the gospel came my way and I realized I was at enmity with God and he was not my best friend in my condition at the time, that was a little bit shocking.
Yeah.
So that was the context that I heard the gospel.
What did you mean by the universalist Hindu Buddhist?
Kind of, I probably would have said, without knowing anything, by the way, not really knowing what any religion taught, I would have probably said that God it's the same God in all religions. And so long as you just do your best and are sincere and are basically a good person, kind of the answer that the average non-thinking person would give. So not even realizing that religions are self-contradictory, I probably would have assumed they all teach the same thing about God, about how to get saved. They each might have their own little works-based path that would have all been fine because I really didn't know anything about religion, God, sin, man. I knew nothing about anything.
And what are kind of some of the building blocks before you got to this age 40 when you got saved? What were kind of the building blocks and the cornerstones of your life building up to that?
Clothes, fun, stuff, just frivolous stupidity.
Yeah.
I mean, not unimportant things because God does care about where we live and what we eat.
Sure.
But it was limited to that. So eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we might die would have been the way that I thought about things. But interestingly, how faithful God is. I actually never thought about eternity, about death. I just never even thought about it. 6 months before I heard the gospel, my dad passed away. And there was a period of time. And interestingly, in God's kindness, he spent a lot of time with someone that shared the gospel with him before he died. So I have very good reason to believe that my dad might have been in the right place when he died.
Wow.
I don't know. I didn't know at the time because I wasn't even a Christian. But at that time, I saw my dad, who was Superman for all practical purposes, one of the most magnificent people you could ever meet. And he died in fear. And that was very disorienting for me because I didn't know what to do with Superman who couldn't fix something.
Right.
And at the time, the other Superman in my life said something that made no sense at all. And so I started really asking what happens after you die.
Yeah.
And then a couple months after my dad died, I forgot about it. And then several months later, and I just remember thinking, everybody I know is wrong. That's all I knew, is that everybody was wrong. And so interestingly, when I heard the gospel, I literally spit out the words, "That's right."
So play out that story, that, start of the day, waking up. How did that happen?
So it was the summer of 2004. My daughter was almost 3 years old and my son was 8. So I dropped my son off at school.
And sorry to pause. What are some of the things in your life that you think God was using at that time to kind of pressure you?
I think my dad's death caused me to think about what happens after you die.
Yeah.
And at that time, I also realized that I didn't know anybody that knew. Does that make sense? Or the ones that kind of said a platitude like, "Oh, he woke up in the arms of the Lord," somebody said.
Yeah.
I'm like, what does that even mean?
Right.
But I didn't even know the questions to ask. But interestingly, you can have an existential moment like that, and it goes away in a couple months, and you go right back to your life.
Yeah.
So that it didn't hang with me. At least I didn't know that it did.
Gotcha.
So God impressed something about eternity on my mind and heart that day. But it was 6 months later, I just took my son to school, went back to my computer, and this was back in 2004. I probably would never have opened something today when you get an email from someone you don't know. But I got an email from someone I didn't know, and I opened it and listened to it. And it was someone sharing the gospel. And as I sat there thinking about my life, God brought to mind, I grew up in the fast lane of Los Angeles as an adult, so there were lots of things God could have brought to my mind to convict me of sin.
Yeah.
he brought to mind stealing money out of my mother's purse when I was probably 4 or 5 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what started coming to my mind as I started hearing that we fall short, that people are sinners. And I sat there thinking, my mom would have given me money out of her purse, but there was something about stealing it that was exciting to me. Yeah. And I remember sitting there thinking, I am going to hell. And I deserve it. And I've been that way since I was little. Wow. Like somehow all of that came to mind in the context of this 40-minute audio that I was listening to. And
so you got an email from someone you didn't know.
Yeah, well, God sent it to me is ultimately, which I know now.
Did you figure out who sent it to you?
Nope.
Really?
And in the beginning of my Christian life, many things like that happened because I didn't know any Christians. Yeah. So it was really the first couple of years was a comedy show. The stuff that God did was so much fun being a Christian. It was like the lights came on in the world and everything started to make sense. But in that moment, so I'm listening to this. So I come home from taking my son to school, and as far as I know, I'm just good. Within 45 minutes, I went from, if God exists, he's delighted with me, to I am totally going to hell and I deserve it and there's nothing I can do about it. And then in that context, the speaker said something about God has done something about your hopeless condition. And I had no idea what that was even going to be at that point because I was not a Christian. I was not interacting with Christians. And so now I'm listening. And I'm even just kind of getting goosebumps remembering it. And I'm not overly charismatic, but I am. And he started to talk about what Christ had done on the cross. Yeah. And it was almost like a picture, the experience of that Pilgrim's Progress movie where everything just falls off. Yeah. So, and I just that is right. And I didn't know the words regeneration. I didn't know the word saved. I didn't know anything except that Christ had paid for my sins and I'm going to heaven. That's all I knew. Wow. And I knew it for sure. And then how God led after that was just one really just miracle after another. Yeah. But that was the moment of God's just kindness, just reaching down into my life when I was just going along.
What was the transformation? What were the things going on in your heart coming together, all the feelings and the thoughts as you were hearing that message?
Well, fear. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom because I was afraid because I realized I was at a war with God, that I was sinning against my Creator. Now, again, maybe not intentionally, but I do have a conscience and I did a lot of stuff wrong when I was younger and older and I knew it was wrong, but I didn't know how wrong it was because I wasn't the type of sinner that it was openly obvious. I wasn't doing the kind of stuff that's easy to point to. I was just living my life oblivious to God.
The respectable sins?
Yeah, right? More respectable sins. And I think there was a lot of shock that how could I be 40 years old and not know this? And do I know anyone who didn't care enough about me to tell me? These are all the things going through my mind. Realizing I can't, before I heard what Christ had done, I realized there was nothing I could do. Yeah. And that was a terrifying 30 minutes, followed by an amazing relief that God would do that. And then just remembering being in awe of Christ, what he had done in light of who he is. Yeah. Trying to figure out how I could even get my mind around that. Could it even be true?
Yeah. That was all happening in the car when you're dropping your...
It was sitting at a little computer in my kitchen in Winchester, Massachusetts, and it was the course of 45 minutes of every intense emotion a person could experience. Yeah. And I all of a sudden just felt like everything in the world made sense. And I also knew, which was a gift, looking back at the time, I knew I was wrong about everything. And so when I came to the Bible, I had such a teachable spirit. I just read stuff and believed it. Yeah. And I didn't have anyone to undo that because I didn't know anybody.
What happened next after those 45 minutes in the kitchen? Was it like a fall down on your knees, cry out to the Lord? What did you do?
I think I was just so shocked. And of course, my daughter was 3 years old and she describes I was 3 years old and my mother went crazy is what my daughter says. But I just felt like, okay, I don't know about these Christians, but I know they have Bibles. Yeah. And so I went down, I got this gigantic Bible that, and I wasn't much of a reader, but I got this gigantic Bible and then I'm just overwhelmed. What do you even do with this thing? Do people actually read it? Yeah. And I just opened it up and started reading it. And it's this just makes sense. Yeah. And
what was your son's reaction? Because he was 8, so he's a little bit older. He might be able to see things a little more. What was his reaction to seeing the change?
Well, I think both of my kids, I didn't portray Christ as someone who was coming to take something away. Okay. I was like, he's coming to give you something magnificent. And anything we lose in the process is nothing. What has sin ever done for us except destroy us? And so he's coming to take away the things that destroy us and coming to give us life abundantly. And everything we need and lots of things we want.
Now, it's funny because you'd mentioned, or it's interesting, because you'd mentioned Pilgrim's Progress a moment ago. And it's such a good image when we see Christian reach the cross and his burden falls off and rolls down the hill. And you'd mentioned that there's a similar experience there. What was interesting in the beginning of that book, when you'd seen the movie, is his wife thought he was crazy. His family thought he was crazy. And he said, I have to go pursue Christ anyway. What was it like with your husband at that time when you had shared that with him, if you had shared that?
Yeah, and I can share that. I recorded onto a DVD and said, here, you better listen to this, because I felt like he was the religious expert in the family and he'd been lying to me. So I gave him that, and he listened to it many times and then had what he claims is a dramatic conversion, which I will leave that to God. I won't touch that one. Sure. So at first my family was kind of just disgusted, but then I think I've shared the gospel with all of them, and nobody else is claiming to be a Christian, but my mom has come to church many times and understands the gospel. And I always tell her if God opens her heart, she'll believe immediately, because she's like, I'll never believe that. And my sister and I have really quite good conversations, because like many people, my sister and others have seen the hypocrisy in the church, been damaged by the bad behavior of professing Christians. And unfortunately, Jesus is often tagged with our failures. But the other reality is there's lots of people that claim to be Christians that aren't, that do a lot of damage. And that is a reality that we have to realize many people experience. And hopefully we don't contribute to that.
Right. I love that you mentioned that Jesus comes to give the things he takes away, or that which is destructive, because I think the world can have this idea that, oh, Jesus is only here to ruin my life, and Christians aren't fun, and we don't get to do anything that's fun, and we don't get to enjoy. It's just kind of a gray life. It's like, no, that's actually the complete opposite of it. Like, the world is the one living in the darkness and the sin and living in things that are destructive. And so I'm glad that you kind of clarified that, because I think that's the witness that we want to have to others, is that Jesus comes to give abundantly, to give life abundantly. So that's so good.
Absolutely. I think one of my friends from college, because I'm still in touch with lots of people, when I talked about what had happened, because my immediate first thought was, all of my family and friends have never heard this, and they're going to be so happy. And of course, we know that isn't always the response that you get when you start sharing your testimony with others. And one of my friends had such a hard time. She kept saying, you mean you don't get drunk anymore? And not that I was ever a huge drinker, but I said, I get drunk every time I want to. I just don't want to. I think that's another thing that people that are maybe caught in physically compulsive type sins, whether it be drinking or drugs or other addictions that you become physically addicted to, and maybe you even try to stop, but you can't. I don't think people realize there's a power they've never accessed, and how God breaks things in our life. I found things that they weren't necessarily sinful, but they weren't productive. I just couldn't enjoy it anymore. God just makes it where it isn't that fun. And then you realize things he takes away from us were things that we didn't need anyway, and were destroying us. And we don't know that till we look back. You think, oh, you can't live without this. And then when you get away from it, you realize you've been delivered from a bondage. And it's so hard to talk to people about that, because they can't imagine a power that can break something in their life like that.
That is so well said. And you know my story, and I'll get to share that on this podcast, depending on when these episodes are released, before or after this episode. And I think it's so true to say there's a power that we just don't know how to reach and can't use until Christ opens our heart to use that. And I like what you said about, I have to visualize, the things he takes away from us that we just don't find interest anymore. I think of it in the same way as like a snake or a lizard, like sheds off that wasteful, like decaying old layer of skin. We're just kind of shedding off the things that don't matter when he's creating something new in us. But I saw that in my own life. Just the movies and the TV shows and the video games and the type of people I hung out with and the type of socialization and the type of things that enjoyed spending my time in. It's just like, I don't really enjoy those anymore.
Yeah.
They don't benefit me, or they're not fruitful. They don't capture my interest the same way.
I remember I'd always pray for my kids, Lord, let them see the hook in the bait, because sin or Satan presents something to us as it has a promise. And of course, I even think about the Proverbs where wisdom and folly are both crying the same thing in the street. Come follow me.
Right.
I'm going in the right direction.
Yeah.
And if we can see where this is really going to take us, it wouldn't be as attractive, but we just don't see it until it's already destroyed our life a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And thankfully that even if we have had a lot of destruction in our life, that God is able to restore when we are saved, and he starts to work and restore things, which is amazing that he does that. But I think, that is the power, that song where it says, God, he breaks the power of canceled sin.
Yes.
When you bring that sin to the cross and Christ pays for it, the power is broken.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always mean it's easy, but it is possible and it is proven.
Amen. Yeah.
The things that, no longer seemed interested, or you broke the power of that sin, were there things that God put in place in those that were holy and righteous and good? What were those things?
Yeah. So he takes something away and gives you something better.
Yeah.
I think that, one, he gives us himself.
Yeah.
And in his presence, pain is pleasure. So if you go through a difficult thing and he's with you and you see the good in it, our suffering isn't wasted. Yeah. So if a person who isn't a Christian suffers, it doesn't usually produce good in their life. Mm-hmm. We know that it will produce good in our life, and we have that confidence, which is a blessing. He gave me a Bible with incredible promises. He gave me his spirit so that I could understand it. Yeah. Gave us new friends. Yeah. And the interesting thing when I think about some of my own friendships that are not necessarily destructive or bad, in a way, we're helping each other pick up speed on the road to hell a lot of times. But when we have our Christian friends, it's what you always wanted in a sorority or fraternity. Right. The genuine friendships, the sisterhood, the brotherhood, the genuine care for one another. Because when we think about the fact that we're all in one body, if one of us is hurting, it really hurts. Yeah. And we want to go help each other because we love each other. Yeah. And sometimes we do see that in the world because there is grace in just being human. Yeah. But there's a genuineness in a healthy local church where nobody is alone. And every burden is lighter and every joy is doubled. So that's what really everybody's looking for in this world. And they're looking for it in a lot of places where it's not going to happen, but that is what we want, to be known and accepted and loved.
So after you were saved, that's the day you would say Christ opened your heart up to him and saved you. The big questions that we've dove into is what your life was like before, how Christ saved you, and what your life is like now, or even after that salvation point and what it's like now. Paul talks about throughout the epistles that the proof of our faith is in our perseverance and in our fruit. He says, maybe it's Jesus or Paul, who says you'll know them by their fruits. Yeah. And so what are some of the things that Christ has done to shine through you and work in your life as a Christian woman?
Well, I think one of the first things that happens is you realize you're not the center of the universe. That's a good start. That Christ is, and that our goal is that he would have first place in everything. And that people that don't know him would come to love him, not submit to him because they have to, which they do, but submit to him because he is so worthy and so kind and is going to do good to us. And I think we just see our purpose in whatever our activities are, our friendships, that we are encouraging one another in Christ, that we are being a blessing to people. And I think when everybody's doing that, nobody falls through the cracks, which is amazing, but that our life will be pleasing to him. Yeah. And I think about when Mary poured the perfume on Christ's head, and the disciples at the time, who didn't really see as straight as they should, one of them said, "Why this waste?" Yeah. But they all kind of grumbled about it. Yeah. And Jesus said, "She did a beautiful thing for me." Yeah. And so I always thought to myself, I wonder if he'll ever say that about me, that I just did a beautiful thing for him. Yeah. And one of the ways we do that is we care about the people that are in his body. Yeah. And I don't think I could have worked that up.
That's a beautiful way of, I know a lot of people go straight to, well done, good and faithful servant, but you picked an amazing illustration that we see in the scripture. I want something that, as you said, God sees and says that was a beautiful thing. I love that. I love that.
One thing I'll share about Pam that you might not share yourself because you're very humble is your heart for evangelism and reaching the lost. I've
goodness, this lady every week at church. Oh, I met this person and I shared the gospel with them.
Exactly.
Pam, go.
It was a couple years ago, and a group of us were getting lunch after church, and we were just, our waiter comes up getting our orders and whatnot, and you were just telling him how we just came from church and whatnot. You just turn to him and go, "Do you know the Lord?" And that, my wife and I afterwards, we were just very encouraged by that. And we're like, wow, the boldness of being able to share that faith. And I know you would acknowledge that's Christ working through you. That's him producing that through you. But it's a wonderful way that God's been using you.
Well, I think one of the things that I do appreciate that, like, everybody's going somewhere. And I think the reality is, I think a lot of us are scared to talk with people because we think we might say the wrong thing or they might be offended. But I actually think it's the opposite. A waiter or someone who crosses your paths, the fact that you even ask about them. So many people are lonely. It's like an epidemic. Yeah. And even just to be a blessing in that way, I just feel like I have a gold nugget in my pocket. What am I going to be ashamed of? Or a gold bar, and we're terrified of sharing it with somebody.
Yeah. Right.
So, and I just feel like people, we don't know what our purpose is in their life. And I just always feel like, Lord, I just don't want to miss my assignment, whatever that is. And it's to be a blessing to people, not to make them a project in any way, but I just think about the fact that no one ever said anything to me, which is probably one of the reasons I just don't want to be that person. Sure. I remember thinking at one point too, I said to one of my family members who was offended, I just said, I don't want to make eye contact with you on Judgment Day. And you're looking at me thinking you didn't even say a word.
Yeah. Wow.
And I don't want that to be the case for anyone that I spend time with.
You don't want to be a reason that someone wasn't able to enter the kingdom of heaven.
Definitely don't want to be a stumbling block to make it harder for them, but I also don't want to neglect opportunities. Yeah.
There's a quote from a guy, he's not even a Christian, he's an atheist, but he was talking about Christianity, and he said, if you guys really believe that, for the Christians who are out there, if you really believe that people who do not accept Jesus will go to hell, how much do you have to hate someone not to share the gospel with them?
Yeah. I think that was Penn Jillette, the
Penn
famous magician, Penn and Teller. They have the TV show, but famous magicians, and that's a very convicting statement.
That's a convicting statement to Christians.
Yeah,
I think we should care that much. You know, I mean, the fact that he knows that, right? And Christians don't think that way.
Yeah,
and
So, how long ago was that when you were saved?
2004.
Okay.
I don't know the exact date.
Sure.
So, spring of 2004.
so almost 20 years ago. There's a handful of people listening to these podcast episodes. To the young women out there, put yourself in the seat of discipling a young woman who you get this one opportunity to just kind of speak into her life. What are some of the things just the key things over the last 20 years of your salvation, your sanctification, God working in your life that if you had one chance, you could just pour that out and take your time? We have time. Just what are the key principles in life, the key wisdom bits that you've gotten that you want the other young women to know?
Well, just the companion of fools suffers harm. So even if you're not doing stupid things, if you're hanging around people going in the wrong direction, you're going to suffer harm, and that everything you see in the world is a lie of what you should be.
What do you mean by that?
By being sexually promiscuous, whatever the looks maxing, I guess, is part of what it's called now, at least from clavicular. And as Christians, we know what's going on in the culture. We're not insulated. So I like to have my ear to the ground about what's happening, because that's where girls are being persuaded of things. And I would say that sin, through the worldly examples, lies. And you won't find out until you believe them and go too far, and sometimes have irreversible damage. And God is true, and his plan for young women and young men is his second best idea he's ever had, the first being salvation in Christ. And the best thing that we can do is grow in our own relationship with Christ, our own maturity, our own confidence in him before you start looking for men or who knows what else is trying to promise you is the answer to everything in the universe. Get into a good Bible preaching church get into fellowship with some other magnificent young women, have the right kind of friends that will encourage you in the right direction, because it's hard to be alone in this world. And just find out what God says and believe it. And it will be so worth it.
And are these just kind of empty promises, or have you seen in other women's life or in your own life, when you don't do those things, that there's results to those, consequences to those?
Well, I was saved when I was 40, and I grew up in the fast lane of Los Angeles. So I have scars. And if someone is young listening to this, you have a chance to make it to the altar or wherever God intends you, the way God intends, without scars. If you've already got the damage, Christ is a magnificent healer. And he does heal us. He puts robes on scars, not open wounds. But you can avoid so much misery in this life if you listen to God.
Amen.
And so obviously I'm not the innocent kind, I'm the washed kind. And by innocent, I don't mean sinless, but younger women have a chance to be innocent. And it is an unbelievable opportunity. If you have already passed that point, today's a new day. And be the washed kind.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing your story with us, Pam.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being with us. And listeners, we hope this can encourage you, refresh you even in your own testimony and how Christ has worked in your life. But we're just so glad to have you here with us. And just listeners, thank you for joining us on this episode of the It Stands Written podcast. And Lord willing, we will see you on the next one.